everybody, and welcome to another episode of Film Freaks. I'm your host, Paul A. Presenza, otherwise known as the Moo Cow.
And I am Lord Jonathan Moody.
And we are here to talk about a movie from 1965 called The Warlord with Charlton Heston.
Is it the Warlord or Lords?
Warlord.
Okay.
With Charlton Heston, Richard Boone, Guy Stockwell.
Wait, is he related to Dean Stockwell?
I don't think so. Rosemary Forsyth and James Ferrantino. And it is a movie that I've loved since childhood. And it's just one of the coolest, neatest medieval dramas that you'll ever see, with lots of fighting and lots of really good action and practical special effects of the type that they just do not do anymore. And it was just a really, really cool and interesting story, and just a neat movie from back in my day. And you had never seen it before.
I had never seen it. I never even heard of it until he once told me about it a couple weeks ago.
Right. And it's directed by Franklin Schaefer, who is known for making things like the original Planet of the Apes movies, and he did Papillon.
Was it Schaefer? It looks like Schaffner or something.
I think it's Schaefer.
Schaefer. Okay.
Yeah. And he did a whole bunch of other things. Let me get the box.
Yep, get the box.
Show the box. Because it's a Blu-ray.
It's a beautiful Blu-ray.
Yeah. Should have had that.
The Warlord.
Yeah, it is a beautiful Kino Lorber Blu-ray. And, whoa, sorry about that, Moo. And it comes with audio commentary from the film historian and critic Sergio Mims. And it comes with a bunch of trailers. Now, I have not actually heard this commentary, so I'm dying to hear it. But, yeah, so Franklin Schaefer, he did Planet of the Apes, he did Patton. He did Papillon. He did The Boys from Brazil. He did a bunch of stuff. He was the director he did a lot of TV stuff, sort of in the 50s, and in the 60s he started to transition into movies, and then in the 70s he did all kinds of famous movies, and I believe Patton won an Academy Award. So yeah, he did all kinds of really good stuff, and this was just one of the earlier films. Now this was not one of the big blockbuster medieval movies that they did back in the 60s, because they had a number of those. El Cid is a perfect example of that, and Camelot and some of the other ones. So this didn't quite have the budget, but it makes up for it by just the effects, the gritty realism that the movie is just grounded in. Although there are times when clearly they are filming on lots and they have matte paintings in the background, because they weren't able to go and shoot in some of the places where the story would have taken place, so they had mats there. And you could kind of see that clearly in the Blu-ray. I mean, that's the thing about Blu-ray, it makes the movie clear, but that it also is going to show some flaws in some of the other aspects.
I don't think it was a flaw. It's just that you can notice it was there. I thought it looked beautiful. It reminded me of the oldies. I was telling him earlier, like movies like Wizard of Oz or whatever had those beautiful matte paintings. And he's not a fan of those. Some of those 1940s.
I mean, it depends on it. I was never a Wizard of Oz fan, but I do love the old techniques. I'm especially a big fan of practical special effects.
Yeah. And
when these guys are building siege towers and catapults and all kinds of stuff, the battering rams, these are real functioning things, and there are real actors and people up on manning those things, and stunt people. Richard Boone was, I believe, a former stuntman who was doing his own stunts.
You said that, so you think he did for real? Or?
I think so. That was like a 40 or 50 foot tower he's rappelling off of, and the camera's on him the whole time.
It's not a CGI.
No, and that's just it. I mean, you see a lot of this kind of stuff in like the Lord of the Rings movie, but it's all CGI. This was not CGI at all. And again, it's the kind of film that you just don't make anymore, unfortunately. And probably for reasons of insurance. And, nobody wants to be liable.
We were talking about that. I was like, I'm not letting my actors do their own stunts, because I mean, it's That's what the stunt people are paid for. You know, you don't want to take their jobs away. But if he was a former stunt person, he's still probably in the stunt union. That would make sense.
And it wouldn't surprise me if Charlton Heston insisted on doing a lot of his own stunts too, because he was that kind of a hero. I mean, he was that kind of a action star. He was kind of the Bruce Willis of his day. And,
He's better than Bruce Willis.
Yeah, better than Bruce Willis. And bigger too. And 1965 was right about the peak of his popularity. And so it's actually kind of a surprise that he was in this movie, which is, like I said, kind of, I don't want to call it a B movie, but it clearly did not have the budget that a lot of these other ones had for Universal. But
also, talk about his hair. Ugh.
Yeah, and it's very, very period oriented. So he's got that monk's bowl cut hairdo, which drove me crazy.
It drove me crazy because all I kept thinking of was Mo from Three Stooges. Just that's what he looked like, and I was like, that's how can you take him seriously with that haircut?
Well, the thing is like I said, it's very period centric, so it's very grounded in reality. So when you hear him sharpening the sword, you can hear the scrape of the metal against the stone.
That was cool.
When they're fighting, you can hear and see and practically feel the metal hitting the stone and just gouging out giant chunks of rock.
Or when like the arrows would strike the person, you could hear it go right in and thump right in, and the person fall.
It's
just
very impressive. It's it's the kind of thing you just don't get anymore in a lot of these heavy CGI movies because people just they either lost the ability to do that sort of thing, or nobody wants to have to pay for the insurance, or it's just a lost art.
The only thing I could probably think of that might be similar to sort of this thing, it would be like Ridley Scott did The Last Siege recently or something, or whatever movie, and I think he did it, and it had like Matt Damon and Ben Affleck and whatnot. But anyway, it was and Adam Driver, so it had a pretty good famous cast, right? And then those guys are not Charlton Heston.
No, they're not the people. They're not rugged enough. They're not manly enough. They're not. I just don't buy them as medieval knight people. I just don't. It's just not. It's it's like Richard Gere and
in First Night.
Yeah, just no. I can buy him as a discotheque dancer, but I can't buy him as a knight. It's just not.
Or a person who buys a prostitute. You can buy him as that.
Someone like Russell Crowe would have worked because Russell Crowe is kind of a
Well, he had Gladiator, so he's already kind of been there, done that.
He's sort of been there and done that, but he's got verisimilitude for the role.
Yeah.
But these guys had it too. Richard Boone was fabulous in this. He was so good. If you're used to seeing Richard Boone back in the 50s and 60s, where he's usually in westerns and he's usually sort of the gruff, tough guy there. He's a gruff, tough guy here too, but he's like a barbarian almost.
He's basically the bodyguard to the Warlord.
And you were asking me about what is his role? What's his relationship with Charlton Heston?
You were like, you'll see.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So basically, the story is so Charlton Heston plays this Norman knight from Normandy, the Normans, and he has been charged by the Duke to hold this land for him. His father was ransomed in the war. They lost all their money. They had no lands. They had nothing. So he's got to work his way up from the bottom all over again for his family. And he brings his brother along, and they come to this place where the former warden has just sort of let things go, and the garrison is deserted, and there's nobody left, and people have just kind of run amok, and he's been told to hold this place and keep the people's goodwill. And because back then, if you were a lord, your wealth was part of your wealth was your land and the people and all the livestock and all that stuff, all the things that were in it. So he wants it to be protected because there are Frisians from the north of Germany that are raiding.
What is a Frisian?
Frisians are from an area called Frisia, which is an area in northern Germany. And they would go and raid. Now, it's funny because you were talking about this looks like it's knights versus Vikings. But the thing is at that time in history, the Normans were the Vikings. They were the Vikings who invaded France over and over and over and over until finally the King of France said, okay, fine, you can have this northern section of country, just leave us alone.
Yeah.
And that's where the Normans, the Northmen, come from. They were French, but they were really anglicized Vikings. So by this time in history, they are the knights, whereas the Frisians were pretty much Northern German Viking-ish, but not really Vikings. They're more like German. It's just German Franks or something like that.
German Franks. That sounds like a German.
Well, they had French Franks as well.
It sounds like a German hot dog.
Yeah, no, the Franks were one of the
I
tribes. And caught in between are the locals, who were kind of like this sort of Celtic group that sort of worships they're animists, so they worship the stones and the spirits of the trees and that sort of thing. And at the same time, you know,
the
the
tree
Normans.
with that face in it. And stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
At the same time, this is an area that is slowly being Christianized and being taken over, and that's
By
where
the
the Norman
priest.
thing's coming over.
I loved him.
Yeah, Maurice Evans was really good.
Maurice Evans, man.
So there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of moving parts. There's stuff between the brothers going on that finally comes to a head, and he ends up, when he gets there, meeting this beautiful, beautiful woman named Rosemary Forsyth, who plays Bronwyn, and she has initially been promised from birth to James Ferrantino's character, who was Mark. And
Oh, hi, Mark.
yeah, so they were supposed to be wed, but it turns out Charlton Heston falls madly in love with Rosemary Forsyth, and there's this thing which is sort of kind of maybe might have happened in history, we're not really sure, basically called prima noct, where the seigneur or the don or the lord of an area had the right to take a virgin bride on her first night.
That's so fucked up.
That's pretty debatable. I think historians have we're not really sure if that actually really happened or not. But it's been the subject of a number of films, and it's definitely part
Was
of
that the
thing
subject
here.
of First Night?
I think so. It's been a long time since I actually watched that film, but it's been utilized before in other motion pictures. But it's the catalyst because it gives Charlton Heston's character the chance to actually, you know, have what he wants, which is Rosemary Forsyth. But when he does, he doesn't really want to take her, and he decides he doesn't want to do it. He's like,
You
okay,
were saying
just,
there were consequences
Yeah.
for it.
he's like, you know, well, he decides he doesn't want to take it that way, and he's like, you know, just go. But then she admits that she's kind of fallen for him too, because, you know, even though she's been promised to Mark the whole time, she's never really had a choice before, and all of a sudden here comes, you know, handsome, strong, you know,
I'm sorry, that haircut.
noble.
I can't call him handsome, man. That haircut, man.
Well,
I'm so,
noble, you know, Sir Chris Conde Lacroix, Charlton Heston, who offers her another chance, and of course a upward mobily chance at that. So now she's kind of figuring out, oh, what do I do, what do I not do? They have the first night, and he decides he's not going to let her go. That sets everything in motion, because now all the villagers are like, well, the hell with that. You had the right, according to our customs and our laws, to do the first night, but you're supposed to give her back. He
Yep.
won't do that, so they end up going over to the Frisians. They invite the Frisians to come out, because during the very first battle at the beginning of the movie, the leader of the Frisians had brought his son along, and he got left behind, and they captured him. They didn't really know who he was, and they know, and so they're like, oh yeah, the whole tribe's going to come and pull that tower down and try to get him back. And there's a big conflict, and stuff happens, and then everything that happens between the brothers finally comes to a head, and it's just a lot going on. But it's an amazing.
I love the brother.
It's an amazing movie.
He's my favorite character.
Talk about Guy Stockwell.
Yeah.
Wow, what a great performance by this guy. Draco.
Yeah.
He's like the younger brother who's tired of living in the shadow of his older brother, wants to sort of go off and do his own thing and be the man. But he's got a cruel streak to him, and, you know, he wants to do things his way, and his way is not the way that anybody ever really wants. You notice when all the soldiers are like, you know, you have to pay your fealty to me, and they're like, not when my lord died, is still alive.
Yeah.
Because they like Charlton Heston's character much better.
Well, that's just that. I mean, also they're you know, basically are indebted to him until the Lord dies, you know.
And they see how Draco's been treating everybody. He's been slapping people. He's been treating them like shit, you know, the whole time. So they don't want him as their lord.
Okay, so here's I want to hear this discussion, because you're right. Draco's been treating all the people like shit, right? And stuff, including his brother. He's been, whatever. But he's been going along with what his brother says. Now, there's the scene. One of my favorite scenes in the movie is like he's kind of being a dick to everybody, and then the kid like hits the horse, makes the horse go crazy, and Draco is like whatever, gets off, and he's gonna basically kill the boy for doing that,
and the little guy for
protecting it, but but that's the thing. That was like a scene I think like kind of was a bit of like, where the what is it, the little guy, what's his name?
Volk.
What?
Volk
is the little guy. He's like thinking to himself, at that point, I don't like these guys. These guys are being dicks to me, and Charlton Heston has not been dick to Volk at all. Like I don't think. I don't feel like he's been rude or nasty.
Not any more than normal that you would in the.
Yeah, he's a lord, so he can do what he wants, but like he's not nasty to him. He's and he protects. He protects, the
kid.
He protects the kid, and he protects the guy from Draco. He slaps him, and which makes Draco pissed off and storm off.
Certainly does.
Draco acted like a little bitch.
The fissure lines between the brothers that had been there for years definitely widened at that point.
And that was another thing that I didn't like, that because it's a romantic story and everything. Man, Charlton Heston was a pussy. He's crying. He's got like these sentimental, like heartthrob kind of like feelings to him, and I'm like, that is not a warlord.
Hey man,
that is a pansy.
You fall in love with a beautiful woman, come back and talk to me then.
I don't know, man. I don't know if
it's Rosemary Forsyth. Good Lord, she's gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous.
I thought he just didn't remind me of like what your typical. Was it 15th or 14th century?
11th, actually.
11th century.
So, but the thing is, he talks about it a number of times. He's like, I sweated in that damn dirty armor for 20 years. He's tired of it. He's tired of fighting. He's tired of all that shit. He's, explains to the girl, I fought all last year. I fought the year before that. I haven't had the time to hang out with pretty young girls. And, he's had a belly full of blood, and he just doesn't want to deal with that anymore. Mm-hmm. He's had to fight his whole life to get him and his brother and his family back to a place where they were, and they still haven't done that yet. He's still trying to claw his way back up the pole.
It's funny because you were mentioning when we were watching it, the ransom, and that wasn't even in the original. Like that wasn't even in a part until later that he brings up the ransom, that he was gonna use the little boy for ransom. But that was never discussed at all. So when you mentioned ransom to me, I go, what? Wait, like I thought I missed something, but I really didn't. I don't think. I think you saw the movie.
Yeah, well,
and knew about that.
That's a typical thing that happened in the Middle Ages. That's one reason why if you were a knight and you fell in the battlefield but you weren't killed, there was a pretty good chance that you would be ransomed back because you were worth a lot more alive than you were dead.
Right.
So, and if you were just a common soldier, you're not worth anything, so nobody's going to bother with you.
I don't know. I really like the ending, though, because I like the fact that they gave the kid back. Like, because it just showed that Charlton Heston's character had a lot of heart.
Oh, yeah.
Was a good guy, I mean, he just had one fatal flaw. He fell in love with that chick.
This is what happens. But the thing is, he's close. He's very close on a number of times when you think he's just going to, take her. But he doesn't. He comes very, very close. And certainly, men of that period, especially if you have the law, quote unquote, on your side, wouldn't have given it two thoughts. Yeah. But he's just not quite like that. He
did do the noble thing that he gave her consent.
Yeah.
At one point, right? And then when she's, when it looked like she wasn't, interested, and he didn't want to have sex with her if she wasn't into it.
And just imagine what Draco's reaction would have been. He just would have taken her and been done with it and kicked her to the curb, and that would have been it.
Yeah, because he had no, because he wasn't going to, there would have been no first night issue had he not fallen in love with her.
On the other hand, a lot more people would have been alive if he had just had his way, and that would have been it, because there would have been no Frisian attack. There would have been a lot more people alive.
Yeah,
so
if he just gave her back to Mark.
So the thing about it is, doing the right thing and doing the noble thing, it's costly, and that's kind of one of the things that this movie likes to bring out. It's, somebody has to pay in blood, and that's what happens, and it's kind of a tragedy.
And blood they pay.
Oh yeah, the fighting in here is pretty fierce. It's pretty amazing. I'm not gonna lie, I loved this when I was a kid. To me it was pretty thrilling, even though there's quite a lot of other stuff going on, and you don't really get the battles. You kind of get stuff in the beginning, and then it kind of tapers off for a while in the middle, and then towards the end, ton of fighting.
Yeah, I was actually thinking to myself, for a movie called Warlord, it had not very much war in it, as much as I expected. But I was okay with it because the story was interesting enough. Like the characters, I was drawn to everybody in there. Like the four or five main people. Like there's Charlton Heston, there was his brother, there was his bodyguard, Richard Boone. And then there was the priest. Obviously the priest and his girlfriend. Right. And that was the other thing too. Like Draco really did not like that he gave the ring. No. And your typical, landed lorded gentry would not like that. There was a very stratified society in the Middle Ages. If you were of the blood, you never mingled with those who were not. And it would be considered polluting, right? So yeah, for him that would have been like dragging the family's blood into the mud, and he just didn't like that. But Charlton Heston, it's different. I mean, he love conquers all, I suppose. So, it's kind of a positive message if you think about it that way. Yeah. But there's just a lot of stuff, and it's just, to me, it's kind of a shame that this movie has been overlooked. Most people, when they think of period medieval dramas of that era of the 60s, like I said, they think Camelot, they think the Vikings, Taras Bulba, all that kind of stuff. Camelot. Which, I mean, when we saw the Vikings was on a Kino Lorber trailer too, so I'm guessing, it's also a really good movie. It's just, you're right, it's probably more overlooked at that point. But they probably have more money for it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And stuff. So, I mean, that's the thing. I don't know that movie either. So this isn't my typical type of, movie. This isn't my typical type of movie. Like, this isn't what I would go to.
I love medieval stuff. I especially like it when they get the medieval stuff right. It all looks right. Stuff looks dirty. So this is what they called, the revisionist version, because before that, like Camelot and usually things before that, like in the 50s, even into the 40s, when you see the medieval stuff, you'll notice everybody's wearing like beautiful, perfect, clean stuff, and everything is nice and everything is idealized. Generally in the 60s, the second half of the 60s into the 70s and 80s, the medieval period looks filthy. Everybody's filthy. Everything looks worn and tattered and torn, and even the dukes and the kings and all that, their armor looks worn, because it was. That was more typical of how reality was. So it's a grittier period, and this is a movie that shows that, which I really, really dig. I never
Well, how
really
do they
liked
know?
Camelot.
I mean, they don't know that that's what they look like. I mean, was there
Well, sure they do. There's a lot of pictures and a lot of manuscripts that have paintings
like
and
drawings
and things.
or
Sure.
something? Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna
So
say,
you can
there's
go
no
back.
photographs
You
back
can
then.
you can research all this stuff, and they have manuscripts that talk about things, and it's just that you have to bother to actually go back and do the research. The fact that there's a Norman tower there dominating the place is perfect. These days they would have just put up a castle, but it's like, no, that's not what they would have had in the frontier, which this would have been.
Disgusting. It's a disgusting little tower.
I love the long axes, the throwing axes that the Frisians had. That's something that the German tribes would have had. It wasn't just a hand axe. It wasn't a battle axe. It was an axe that was designed to be thrown two-handed. And it's this sort of thing. I mean, when the Normans invaded and fought the Anglo-Saxons would have had those weapons. So it's really well researched, and that's really where the money went to. The money went to making it as physically real as possible. When the arrows are flying, everything looked good. The catapult was amazing. It had really, really good aim. I doubt the catapult was really that accurate, but, for the sake of drama, they made it so that it was, hitting up that siege tower pretty easily.
Yeah, the siege tower is pretty cool.
That was cool. The tactics were good. The idea of them burning the door so that they could, pound their way through it and attack, because that's the weak point in any
and then
fortification.
Using the hot oil later for
the burning oil.
Yeah,
that was nasty.
Yeah, I would not want that on me.
There was some blood and gore. I mean, not like you're going to see maybe in a horror movie, but guys get burning torches thrown in their face, and burning oil, and people get chopped up, and our boy Mark meets a particularly bad end with a tree. That was kind of rough.
Poor Mark. Well, not poor Mark. I mean, he just let it go. I mean, I know she's beautiful, and he had his heart set on her, but at that particular time, he might have had a chance to at least be around her and to whatever, because she was gonna be promised to the people at the end because of.
Yeah, I'm thinking about maybe lions fighting over a maid, and one of them is going to have to die in order for the other one to get them. And
yeah, it's sad.
What happens?
It's sad, but I mean, in the same sense, I'm kind of rooting for Charlton Heston there, because even though he was sort of a he kind of took her, but it wasn't they both fell in love.
He's older, he's more measured, he's more philosophical about things, even though he's a man of action, whereas Mark is very headstrong. He's young, he's impulsive, he wants what he wants, and he doesn't want to have to debate about it. He thinks he's been wronged, and he's just going to do whatever he can about it. The one moment comes when he thinks that Bronwyn has been brought back by the father, Njal, and he's like, okay, yeah, I flew off the handle, and according to our traditions, he had the right to take her. I lost my head, but now she's back, and he's like, not quite. Mm-hmm. And then that's the tipping point for him. There's no going back for that. And then, when the Frisians are attacking, he's helping them the entire way.
Yep.
So at that point, you've cast your lot, and that's going to be it. So I don't know. It's I think that there are some people who are very, very action happy who are going to say, well, there's a little too much romance in this. Some people are going to look at this and who are very interested in the romance and say, well, there was too much fighting, too much action for this. I kind of like the balance between the two. Yeah, I think Franklin Schaeffer was very wise in the fact that he knew most of the heavy fighting was going to take place in the third reel, in the last third of the film. Mm-hmm. So within the first 5 minutes after they come and they're introduced, they go right into a battle. And I think that was very, very wise, because that sets the tone. It lets people see, hey, there's going to be some action here, but it gives the audience a chance to breathe, because you're kind of expecting from the title there's going to be action in there, and you get it. But he also knows there's going to be a period in the middle where there's going to be a lot of story and a lot of character development, and we have to give them something in order to sort of, to set their expectations, or else they're just going to get bored. You know what I mean?
So was it the king of the Frisians? Was that what he was? Or
we calls him the prince of the Frisians.
Prince. But what the son is going to be the new prince, right?
Yeah.
Or
right.
whatever.
Right.
So that's why they want him back, is because he's royalty to them.
Yeah, so really his title would probably been more like a chief. So he's more like, because these are more tribal chiefdoms than in kingdoms.
Yeah.
So yeah, he would have been the chief's son. He would have been the next in line, traditionally.
Right.
So it's very important that he.
But they kept calling him Prince, though. So I don't know if that was because they were of royalty, or whatever, and whatnot. But they kept calling him Prince, and I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, he was. I mean, I liked that guy. I liked the chief or whatever guy. I liked him a lot. Thought he was pretty cool. I would have loved to see more of that. See, I think that's the problem. I mean, you can only make this 2 hours long.
Exactly.
And so unless they made it 2.5 hours or 3 hours long and added more stuff, but it would have been nice to see more stuff with the Frisians, because they were interesting characters.
I always thought back when I was a kid, I was like, man, I wonder what happens with the rest of the story, because at the end, when Mark finally gets what's coming to him, he injures Charlton Heston's character pretty severely.
Yeah.
He's been cut and he's bleeding, but he's got to go all the way back to the Duke to explain what the hell's going on, and maybe if he's lucky, get his place back and not have to suffer, having to fight some other guy. So he has to get on his horse and he has to go, and of course Boris is coming with him because he's like, your dad put me here to watch your back, and I'm not leaving after all these years, so they got to go back. So what happened? Did he even actually make it to court with an injury that bad? We don't know.
I don't know.
It's kind of a loose end there, and the girlfriend, Rosemary Forsyth Bronwyn, has been sent off with the Frisians because they now are at peace, and the guy's like, well, you gave me my son back, so what can I do for you? And he says, well, if you would give my lady sanctuary.
Well, at first he doesn't even say that. Like, at first he just doesn't want anything,
right,
or whatever. Then he was like, I think it was Boris or something. It was like, what about your lady? And he was like, if you give my lady sanctuary, I will.
And every single time, and this is the character that's consistent, a character design, or the characteristic of Charlton Heston's character. He takes the hard way. He takes the hard, noble way every single time, no matter what, even if it's injurious to him or his family or whatever. He does what he's supposed to do and takes the consequences for it, and that's the biggest difference between himself and his brother, who's more interested in shortcuts and more interested in what he can get out of it than the way it's done.
I'm surprised that the Frisians were so nice, to him after he gave the son back, because they were literally fighting over this shit a day ago.
Right.
And now all of a sudden, oh wait, you're bringing me my son instead of asking for a ransom? Okay.
It's I guess personal at that level, because professionally, they understand, these guys are raiders. They raid the countryside. We protect them. That's what we do. Cops and robbers, cowboys and Indians, whatever. That's your role. This is our role. This is how it's always been. This is how it always will be. Your
criminals were good.
But when blood was involved, that made it a whole different story. That made it personal.
Mm-hmm.
And, Charlton Heston's character could have been just as shitty as his brother was. And he had every, possible motive considering what happened with his own father. But he chose not to go that way. And I think the Frisian prince appreciated that.
I will say, I almost had a tear in my eye when I saw him.
Tell me about it.
Father and son reunite.
Yeah.
Because that was just a cute little scene. I mean, I don't know. The movie had moments like that where I was just like, aw.
There are some very genuine, touching moments in this movie, in addition to all the swords and fighting and romance and witty dialogue. There's some great dialogue, especially by Guy Stockwell. His character is so funny. Just the stuff he says is just amazing.
I think we were talking about it, but there was one scene with Charlton Heston, Guy Stock, all the main 4 or 5 guys or whatever, all together.
On camera at the same time.
Yeah, on this camera at the same time. And I'm like, oh my God, this is just fantastic, because the Maurice Evans and Guy Stockwell together, period, those guys, they know how to chew scenery like no other, but in a good way. They weren't bad. They were just they definitely knew how to chew scenery, and I loved it. I had a fun time.
Right, and it's a perfect example to see, Guy Stockwell's character Draco, because you can see the scheming going on. Mm-hmm. On the surface he looks like he's helping his brother, but he's really not. He's setting himself up because he's smart enough to know how this is going to play out.
I really thought he had a change of heart when he went to go see the Duke, and then he comes back and says, nope, I'm the new warlord. You are no longer, you can leave now and, take your girl, but let me take the ring. He was such a dick. And then he asked the people, would you, you now belong to me, and they're saying, no, not as long as our Lord is alive.
And Charlton Heston knew it. I mean, when Draco goes to leave, you could tell he's not happy about it. He knows what's going to happen. He knows the Duke's going to hear about this and get pissed off because he crossed the line. He didn't do what he normally would have done, which was do the law, obey orders, because of his heart.
He didn't, because he was supposed to, he was supposed to give her back after he had his way with her, And that was that. That was the agreement.
Right.
And then when he said, nope, I'm not doing that because I fell in love, they're like, well, that's great, but now you have just now pissed off like a whole entire group of people now,
Right.
like that,
Right.
you know, want
Well,
revenge.
just imagine this kind of bare bones story could be told anywhere at any time. You could have this in the West, and there'd be gunslingers fighting each other. This you could have it in modern day. You could have it in like
I told you it reminded me of like
Mafia.
Seven Samurai or
Right,
whatever,
yeah.
because like it has that feeling of like a group of people taking over a small like little, you know, area and whatnot. I would love to see the Seven Knights, you know, or whatever, like a Seven Samurai, but it's like Seven Knights, you know. I mean, whatever. You know.
Yeah, it would be very interesting. But yeah, I've always wondered about, you know, a sequel, sort of prolonged, seeing what would happen. But I also like an ambiguous ending. You know, it leaves it to your imagination, and you get to create the story. And maybe
It's
in
not
your
based on a real story, so you have no idea.
So maybe in your world, you know, he manages to convince the Duke to give him it back, and they live happily ever after. Or maybe other things happen, and maybe he's got to go fight the Frisians again. Who knows?
Maybe he died along the way.
Maybe she gives birth to his son while he's gone, because they do consummate finally, and who knows what happens after that. I mean, you could do all kinds of stuff, which is why when it's done well, ambiguous endings can be really, really cool things, because it leaves the imagination of the audience to go ahead and create their own story.
We didn't talk much about the witchcrafty spiritual side of it, which was really interesting.
Oh yeah.
Because there was some, there was that one scene where he first really talks to her in he's, you know, kind of chat, not when he first met her, but like when he has a chat with her about the herbs that she has and everything. And he basically, you were even saying he was very superstitious.
Oh yeah, they're very superstitious people at this point.
And at that time, they thought like, you know, those things would, you know, and in a way, it's funny because in a way, a lot of people probably thought she did cast some kind of spell on him, like a
witchery.
love spell, and you know, and everything. So there was,
especially since the first warden is there dead in bed with another chick that, you know, they said was, you know, had bewitched him, and you know, it's
which,
like
I mean, probably
over
not. She probably like, you know, he fell in love with her because she was pretty hot. I mean, that chick that died. You know, I don't know.
You're like pretty hot for a corpse.
Pretty hot for a dead chick.
Dear.
I mean, that's not something you normally say, but all right. But no, I mean, you know, because it was just a body or whatever.
Sure, but since they don't have that story, they have to sort of fill it in on their own, and because these are superstitious people living in superstitious times, they fill it in the best way they can,
Yeah,
which is.
but did you notice? Did you notice that when the I keep wanting to call him Friar Tuck, the fucking priest. When the priest was in it, he was talking about the witchcraft and stuff, and then the man or whatever the Charlton Heston's character was very much like it felt like he knew that it was just some chick. You know, it wasn't like witchcraft. It wasn't a witch in my house. It was just some fucking chick, a virgin chick that, you know, or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, there was no...
I liked Maurice Evans' character, the priest. He was really cool.
He was cool.
I liked the fact that, you know, he was very protective and very, you know, he liked the people, even if they weren't all necessarily the best Christians.
He stood up to one of them when they came to... Charlton Heston to ask for stuff or whatever. He was like, "Oh, but these are my, you know, friends here, blah blah. They are really good, you know." And it was like, all right.
Yeah, because we're dealing with people who were still steeped in what they would have been considered pagan rituals and customs and religions. So he could have been somebody who would have been like, "Oh, we have to stamp all this out, blah 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 blah." But he wasn't like that. He saw room to allow them to keep their ways, but also, you know, here's our way, and let's see if we can't work something out, which was neat. And so there was room for that. There's room for compromise, which, again, not the sort of thing that Draco would have been. You hear what he said. He's like, you know, when he becomes Lord, he's like, "I'll show them what rebellion brings. I'll give them empty sleeves and wooden legs." He wasn't kidding. That's what he was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So in everybody's best interest, it was best that he dies.
Draco.
Yeah, and Draco figures he can't ever escape his brother's shadow unless he kills him.
No.
because he's the older brother. He's the one who gets all the
So
favors.
it's either one of them had to die in order to get, like, basically the land back or whatever.
And that's the second one. I mean, Charlton Heston's already dealing with Mark. One of them has to die with the chick. So yeah, so he's a tough cookie in this film. I really like that.
Oh, you mean Charlton Heston's too?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, you gotta deal with that shit. I mean, but on top of that, he's crying all the time. Yeah, so he's a tough cookie.
No, please. Not when he gets the heated sword cauterizing his wound.
Oh yeah, that shit I would not.
That was
want.
nasty, but it was a funny a trick that Boris said he learned. He's like, it'll take 10 men to hold my lord still, or one woman, because he figures he's not gonna carry on if there's a woman there.
Yep.
Pride of manhood.
Exactly, but if there's like 10 men there, or whatever, or yeah, so it was funny. It was. And then she was there holding. That was probably, see, to me when I started watching, I go, okay, this is the scene that they realize they like each other in that scene, because they're looking into each other's eyes, and it's a very intimate scene.
Yeah,
already.
He's suffering like severely, and she sees that he's not just like some man made out of stone. He's a regular person with regular feelings, and it's the walls between them crumble at that moment. So it's a very effective scene. Also,
a really good scene I liked was after they met, whatever the Charlton Heston and Rosemary met. Rosemary goes back to Bronwyn, goes back home to her group, to her people, and whatnot, and we meet Mark for the first time, and Mark can tell just by then, like, she's starting to fall in love with this guy. Mm-hmm. She's starting to like this guy. And he's like, don't ever go see him again. Of course, she can't help it if she
right, and he already sees there's something else going on here.
He don't like it at all.
And she's getting weepy, and she's like, if I'm asking you these questions, is that upsetting you? She's like, no. And at that point, it's like, oh shit, she's got feelings for him too. Oh dear.
I did respect him at one point, Mark, because at one point he was having a scene where he was like coming over to what's her name, he was talking to his what was that guy's name? The one who was he wasn't like a duke, but what was he? Like he was he was part of the other group of people.
The Frisians?
The peasants or whatever.
Oh,
he was like
about
the father-in-law.
Yeah,
or something.
Niall.
What?
Niall,
yeah. So Neil and them are talking.
He's like the tribal elder.
Yeah, and he's like, hey, look, I like, as I told you before, I'm sorry I was upset about like losing her, but I started realizing that Charlton Heston is the warlord, and he can take what he wants, so I can't, but he can't keep her, and he's absolutely right. Mm-hmm. Charlton Heston had no right at all. Because he even said that one line when he said it. He said, I have a right to take you, right? But he knew he did not have a right to keep her. And so when that set the whole thing in motion, man.
And the thing is, Niall sees the whole thing coming. He can tell what's going on, and, he doesn't really know.
Was he the one who smacked or like touched?
Yeah.
And then he got fucking Draco
don't touch the Lord.
Draco.
But he's the one who sees what's going on, and he tries to maneuver around it and says, okay, yeah, you could, to take her your way is rape, but if you're going to do it our way, you have to go through all of the steps, you have to go through all the stuff, and, are you going to do that? And he's like, fine, so, show that you're serious. And so he does. And unfortunately, he understands that, for him to put himself in this position and to risk everything, it's not just because he wants to have sex with her, it's because there's something going on between them. And she's not screaming and trying to run away either, so,
At first, she looked like she was going to go away, because he did say, go away, go. And then, she says she can't go.
She admits that she's been bewitched as well, which was a great line, I thought, because the whole time they keep accusing her of being the witch, but she's the one saying, hey, I'm the one that's bewitched. I was supposed to marry this guy. That's all I ever knew all my life. And now all of a sudden you come out of nowhere and steal my heart. against my will. That's a rough situation. What are you going to do? I mean, do you go? Do you just give up what your heart wants and then live the rest of your life?
You do see that in movies and in real life.
Yeah,
a lot
crimes of passion,
where people are in love with somebody, like they're dating somebody, but then they meet somebody else that just completely takes their heart away. And like, what do? Do you let them stay with the person even though they're not? Now they're all of a sudden they're having feelings for somebody else, or
right.
does the person just let them go?
It's the classic head versus heart. I mean, everybody's gonna solve that conundrum their own personal way, and sometimes it leads to bloodshed for others. It's it's a tragic thing. What are you gonna do? It's Romeo and Juliet, only not teenagers.
Well, and speaking of which, I actually really liked some of the dialogue. Reminded me of like Shakespeare type stuff.
It was well written.
Very well written, and but kind of like just even some of the. I thought they were going to say "Thou shalt not," "Thou shalt blah blah blah."
Yeah. They didn't use that, but they definitely used language.
Which they probably would have, right?
Maybe not. I mean, we don't really know, but the language is used, and the metaphors are couched in terms that people in the Middle Ages would have understood. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So when they say things, they're not really using the language of modern people, even though they're using the words modern people. They're not speaking it in such a way that a modern person would have normally have said. So
exactly,
it's very interesting and it's well done. So.
By the way, we were talking earlier about the music.
Music was really good.
Yeah, music was amazing.
It's got a really good action music, but then it's got a really nice, pretty sort of romantic background to it as well.
Just stuff you heard back in like the 30s or 40s or something, but now it feels like it gets lost,
Very well done. Very well shot. There's one point, I don't know whether you noticed, but the part where the siege tower is just about to tip over and you see the platform starting to fall and all the people falling off. As soon as they fall, you see the moon up there in the daylight. I don't know if you saw that.
I'm not.
But
not offhand, I can't remember.
I know Franklin Schaeffer said, "Oh yeah, we got to get that. That's freaking cool." Yeah,
wow.
That was neat, and it's not something I never really noticed before until now that I get to see it on the Blu-ray. So I'm dying to hear in the commentary at that shot to see if he says anything.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to hear what the commentary has to say too, because I think it's one of those films that like I never heard of this movie, but generally Paul hasn't picked a movie that I'm like, oh, this movie's boring. It's usually something I've never heard of, but it's pretty decent, and there's obviously something to it.
It's kind of a forgotten movie. You were saying this would be a good movie for Criterion, the Criterion thing, but
for Criterion
Kino
collection.
Lorber do it.
Yeah, well, no, but sometimes Kino Lorber does films and then Criterion does them later, or vice versa. Like sometimes Criterion does a movie first and then Kino Lorber does it. So I fucking love those boutique companies.
I know, and I've done a little bit of research previously, and from what I gather, there was some contention on set at the time between the director Franklin Schaeffer and Charlton Heston about the approach for some things, about some of the directions, some of the characters' actions, but clearly they worked it out because they would work with each other again a couple of years later when they did Planet of the Apes.
Well, I was actually thinking about that because I remember hearing that Charlton Heston did not want to do Planet of the Apes originally because it was too goofy, But I think he signed on to it probably because Franklin would make it a little like above like B movie level.
And now it's considered a classic sci-fi. I don't know about the follow-ups to the originals.
But those
pretty
are
classic.
Fun, At least they're fun. You know what I mean? Like,
mostly.
Yeah, I mean, well, the actual regular ones, not the remakes.
Oh no, that was terrible.
But like I'm talking about like the original. I think like Battle for the Planet of the Apes and stuff like that. Those are just fun. Like those aren't very, They're
popcorn movies.
Yeah, they're popcorn, silly, goofy movies that. That's what sequels are supposed to be, Like, sequels aren't supposed to be.
Yeah, this is more of a medieval pageantry without the pageantry, though. It's more grounded in reality. And I think that's probably ultimately the reason why this wasn't like a big, huge hit, is that it lacked the pageantry of the time because this was a different kind of movie. This was more gritty, real kind of version of the Middle Ages.
Well, it kind of sucks that this didn't get like a Oscar or something, or get more known for for it, because it should have. It should have been more,
I don't remember who won what in 1965, but I imagine they were up against some pretty stiff competition.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show you that comes from a period where you could watch 30 excellent movies in a given year that could have won Best Picture, unlike today. But what are you gonna do?
Well, today, I mean, it's funny. There's a few movies today in 2021 that I think will get nominated or whatever, but they're not that many, and because if they are, it's because that's what we have, or whatever. That's all we have, and the thing, it's a different time period,
it is.
and the '60s had some original, interesting movies.
And the thing is, most people know and remember the Academy Award winners, but movies like this that kind of escape notice, this is the kind of film that you want to go out and check out. And I think that's why Kino Lorber said, hey, we'll see if we can't put out the Blu-ray to this and get the commentary and et cetera, because this is one of those movies that should get some more notice, especially for modern audiences who may not know about it. So,
definitely.
and that's why I picked it for Film Freaks, because I loved this movie from when I was a little kid, like 8 years old. It got me into history and everything medieval and role-playing games and Dungeons and Dragons and all that. It all stems from this film.
Yeah, I mean, you started with Angel Heart this year, and then this. This is your second one. So I mean, it's definitely one of those things where I once again, I'd actually heard of Angel Heart, at least. I'd never heard of this one. So, and that's perfect. I remember we were hanging out with a bunch of people, and they had never heard of Warlord either. So, I mean, you found something that I think people would be, interested. If they haven't seen it, they should see it.
Yeah.
Go watch it. It's really good.
Do yourself a favor. Get a copy of it. It's really good.
If you can watch it on streaming, cool. Watch it. Try to make it on a good HD streaming site.
And the thing is, it's got plenty of action for the guys who like to see that sort of thing. It's got plenty of romance and nice stuff for the ladies who like that sort of thing, or vice versa.
Or there's the guys that like the romance stuff too.
If you like little people, you'll get some of that too.
I was surprised. I really did like the romance stuff too, because sometimes that stuff gets cheesy.
Right, it was well done.
And gets in the way of the plot, right? Like, typically speaking, those kind of scenes get in the way of the plot. Like, people are like, oh, I don't care about the love stuff. Let's get to the action. But the thing is, the love stuff is what sets up
drives
the action.
everything.
It drives the action. So, I would compare this as much as I could to, hearing about The Last Siege, or whatever, because that was about love and about, fighting each other over whatever. So it's like there are movies like that exist, but this is just phenomenal. I don't think you could ever do something similar to this.
Well, you're not going to see it made quite like this. It's all going to be CGI from here on out. You'll never see another Catapult being made and then fired by studio people. I just don't see that happening. Maybe an indie person might attempt it, but I doubt you're going to get any of the unions sign off on that. I doubt you're going to be able to get the insurance people to sign off on that.
Well, it costs too much money. Yeah.
Costs too much money.
Costs too much.
And who has the know-how for that sort of thing now? Hollywood had those experts back in the 50s and 60s and even 70s. These days, those guys are gone.
Are they?
Most of them are. Most of them.
I don't know. There's probably still some.
There's a few practical effects people left, but most of it has been digital. And that's just the way it is now. It's unfortunate.
It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. There's nothing you can do about it. Sort of. I mean, unless you can find a company. There may come one day where Hollywood changes, and all of a sudden they start listening to what needs to be done.
And another movie I've been toying with doing on Film Freaks is a movie called A Bridge Too Far. That's really the last great practical, sweeping, epic practical special effects film.
William.
Yeah,
Goldman, write it.
And everybody's in that. Michael Caine is in that movie, and Anthony Hopkins is in that movie, and just a whole bunch of people. But the thing is, they used all the genuine World War II stuff. Yeah. There's this one scene where you're seeing like 150 planes flying overhead bombing and stuff. Those are the real planes. They actually got pilots and put them up there in those planes. You will never see that. And they had actual soldiers parachuting out of those planes. You will never see that again. Never.
There was so I hope I don't butcher this, but there's Josh Becker had a story where he, the director who did like Thou Shalt Not Kill Except, Lunatic's Love Story, whatever, you know who he is, but for the audience might not know. But he was asked once if he could put a scene with helicopters fighting each other. Well, not helicopters, airplanes fighting each other. And he said, "Oh, you mean like dog fights?" And they go, "Yeah." He was like, "No, because this is a realistic, real, like, story. This is a true story. There were no dog fights in that story." And he was like, "Oh, well, could you put dog fights in the story?" And he goes, "Somebody else could, but I'm not going to because I'm going to have my name on it, right. And I don't want, people to look at that." And that's the problem is somebody goes, "It would be really cool if we had a dogfight movie." Now, if he told them, "Hey, let's, I'll write you a dogfight movie or whatever, and, we can make that," that's different. But like him saying, I'll and that's what Hollywood likes to do. Hollywood likes whatever's hip, whatever's cool at that time, and then they want to change history and change all that. Now, it's cool if you're Tarantino, who can just, rewrite history, and it's like, it's supposed to be like, the Nazis get killed or whatever, what I mean? That's better than,
Well, and then Hollywood has also learned some valuable lessons too. I mean, we're just talking about showing dogfights with actual real pilots and real planes doing that. You just got to go back to the Howard Hughes classic Hell's Angels, which has some of the most amazing photography, aerial stunts that you will ever see in your life. But there were several pilots who died in the production of that film. So Hollywood doesn't want to go back to that, especially these days.
So they'd rather have like a fake,
nobody's willing to go that far for the art anymore.
Well, you know what? For safety reasons, sometimes maybe that is for the best. But when it comes to, some of these things, I don't know. I liked all the practical effects. I liked all the stunts. I liked all the action.
The ringing sound of the metal sword smashing into the stone, and you see a big chunk of stone coming off. I mean, that was real. You could feel it. I mean, you could practically smell it. It was awesome.
So there you go.
Puts you in the moment.
Hopefully more people make more movies like that are just sort of, more, I guess, practical, than anything. But who knows?
So there you go. I think that about wraps up this episode of Film Freaks. Thank you very much for joining us. And please join us again next month when it is Mr. Moody's turn to pick a film that he loves. And that's what this show is all about.
Yeah.
Movies that we love. And
that
we
we
enjoy
showing. We can't wait to share it with you guys. That's the thing, man. We got so much. We got so many different shows, and this one is just because we wanna do bad, stinky movies, but we also want to do pretty good ones too.
And I really do like finding films that have just either been forgotten about or people don't think about or overlooked.
Difference between you and me, like you watched when you were a kid Warlord and things like that, and I watch things like Ghostbusters as we just had and things like that, which are fine. It's a complete different, but mine's more mainstream than you are.
And that's fine. You get a little bit of both.
Get a little bit of both. So I guess on the odd days you get the more gritty, darker kind of more.
Oh yeah, Angel Heart was definitely grittier and darker.
Love that one.
Good stuff.
And that was another movie I hadn't seen before. He's been showing me movies that like I've never heard of or seen, so or have heard of but never seen. So there you go. Well, tune in next month for a whole brand new episode, and it'll be a whole brand new year. So
there you go.
Enjoy it.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Say goodbye, Moo.
Oh, that's his name now.
Little Moo.